Clint Eastwood's bodyguard walked onto the live set of The Tonight Show, grabbed Bruce Lee by the collar, lifted him from his chair, and told him he was nothing. 70 million people were watching. 5 seconds later, the bodyguard was standing frozen on the stage floor, unable to breathe, unable to move, unable to do anything except stand there in front of the largest television audience in America while Bruce Lee adjusted his collar and sat back down as though nothing of particular consequence had just occurred. Clint Eastwood watched every second of it from 4 feet away. Then he did something that nobody in that studio expected from the most iconic tough man in Hollywood history. He apologized. This is what happened on The Tonight Show in October 1973. The night that 70 million people watched everything that skeptics had ever said about martial arts, that it was theatrical, that it was camera work, that it was cooperative performance dressed as combat, get answered in 5 seconds on live television with no preparation, no choreography, and no second take. NBC Studios, Burbank, California. Late October 1973. The green room smelled of coffee and cigarettes and the specific tension of 2 people sharing a small space who come from different enough worlds that the space between them is charged with things that have not yet been said. 2 chairs, 2 legends, 1 couch they would soon share on the most watched late-night program in the country. Bruce Lee sat on the left, working through note cards with the deliberate precision that characterized everything he did. He prepared for television appearances the way he prepared for everything. With complete attention, nothing improvised, nothing left to chance, everything designed to communicate exactly what needed communicating to exactly the people who needed to hear it. 70 million viewers. The largest platform he had been given. An opportunity to share martial arts philosophy, to demonstrate what Jeet Kune Do actually was, to reach people who had seen Enter the Dragon and were curious about the man behind it and whether the man behind it was as real as the film suggested. Clint Eastwood sat on the right. Relaxed, boots propped up, hat tilted back, looking precisely as he looked in every film, the controlled, dangerous ease of someone who had spent decades turning that exact quality of presence into one of the most commercially successful careers in Hollywood history. He was not preparing, not rehearsing, not checking note cards. He had done this 100 times. Been on Carson, been on every program, been everywhere. This was routine. This was simply being Clint Eastwood in public, which was the only performance required, and which he had mastered completely. They had exchanged polite nods when they arrived. Professional courtesy. No real conversation, no warmth, no connection. They came from different worlds in ways that went beyond style or genre. Bruce had fought his way into Hollywood against resistance that Clint had not faced, the specific resistance of an industry that had decided what Asian actors were permitted to be, and that had resisted every attempt to expand those permissions. Every role, every decision, every moment of Bruce's career had been earned against active opposition. The path Clint had walked had its own difficulties, its own obstacles, but they were different obstacles, and the difference was visible in the room as a tension that was unspoken but present. Standing in the corner was Ray, Clint's personal security. 6'5", 290 pounds, former college linebacker, now a professional bodyguard whose job was to protect Clint from fans, from threats, from anyone who approached wrong. Ray had not been able to look at Bruce Lee without something shifting in his expression since the moment Bruce walked in. Not something he would have named, not something he would have admitted to, but visible to anyone paying attention, the specific hostility that takes the form of dismissal, of deciding what something is before encountering it, of finding the presence of someone different from yourself in a space you consider owned by someone like yourself to be a problem that requires managing. He watched Bruce the way men watch things they have already decided are threats. Not because of what Bruce had done. Because of what Bruce represented. Competition for attention, for respect, for the space that belonged to real American stars, not foreign martial artists, not kung fu performers, not people who looked different and sounded different and were different. He had not said any of this. He would not say any of this. But it was there in everything he did, and it was building toward something. A production assistant knocked and leaned in. 5 minutes. Mr. Eastwood would be introduced first, then Mr. Lee. Standard format. Johnny would guide the conversation. 70 million people watching. Make it memorable. Clint stood and stretched. He looked at Bruce with the casual confidence of someone who is about to offer something they consider a favor. You ready for this? Carson's audience can be tough, especially for newcomers, especially for people who aren't American. They're a traditional crowd. Western values crowd. You being a Chinese martial artist, that might not play well. Might get a cold reception. Just a warning. Bruce looked up from his note cards. His expression was calm, entirely unreadable. I appreciate the warning, he said. But I've faced tougher crowds, tougher resistance, tougher everything. Johnny's audience will be fine. They're human beings. They respond to skill, to authenticity, to someone being real. That is what I will give them. That is always enough. Clint's expression moved through something. Not quite a smile. Not quite hostile. Something between, the specific expression of someone testing a person and finding the test returned with interest. Confidence, he said. That's good. You'll need it sitting next to a real movie star, a real American icon. Hope you can hold your own. Hope you don't get overshadowed. The words landed differently from the way they were packaged. Not a joke. A test of hierarchy. The subtle establishment of who was the main guest here, who was the addition, who the audience had come to see. Bruce heard it. He chose not to engage. He turned back to his note cards and continued preparing for what he had actually come here to do, which was speak to 70 million people about martial arts philosophy, about what Jeet Kune Do was and why it mattered. Not Clint's need to establish dominance. Not Ray's hostility radiating from the corner. Just the work, just the purpose, just the opportunity. They walked to the stage entrance. Ray followed. Too close. Hovering. Watching Bruce with the focused attention of someone who has already made a decision and is simply waiting for the moment to act on it. Johnny Carson finished his monologue to warm laughter and sustained applause. Then he introduced Clint. The crowd erupted. Standing ovation. Clint walked out with the ease of someone receiving exactly what he expected, acknowledging the crowd with the controlled warmth of someone who had spent decades calibrating that specific response. He sat, shook Johnny's hand, settled in completely at home. The interview began. Charming, funny, self-deprecating but assured, the performance of being Clint Eastwood executed with 30 years of practice behind it. Then Johnny introduced Bruce. The applause was different. Enthusiastic in sections, uncertain in others, mixed in the way that all new things receive mixed receptions before they have established themselves completely in a culture. Bruce walked out, calm, professional, took his seat beside Clint. The physical contrast registered immediately for everyone watching. Clint larger, taller, more traditionally imposing, looking more like what this particular audience expected an action star to look like. Bruce smaller, compact, different, and despite being an American citizen, despite speaking flawless English, despite being entirely prepared and entirely professional, visually the addition rather than the main event. Bruce, Johnny said warmly, Enter the Dragon was extraordinary. The speed, the power, the technique, is that real or is some of it camera work, special effects? Before Bruce could answer, Clint spoke. Of course it's movie magic, Johnny. That's what movies are. Making things look more impressive than they actually are. Bruce is talented, genuinely talented. But movies exaggerate. Movies enhance. That's their function. Right, Bruce? You'd agree that choreography is not real combat. That what audiences see is a performance, not reality. The challenge was measured but unambiguous. It questioned Bruce's legitimacy directly, questioned the authenticity of the discipline itself, framed martial arts as sophisticated illusion while implying that Clint's own work represented something more genuinely rooted in authentic American toughness. Bruce kept his voice completely steady. Movies do use angles, do use editing. That is true. But the techniques are real. The speed is real. The skill is real. What you see on screen comes from 30 years of training, of mastering a discipline that has been tested and proven over centuries across cultures by millions of practitioners. That is what the films show. Real skill made cinematic. Not illusion. Reality made accessible. There is a difference. Clint leaned back. Arms crossed. The body language of someone who has decided to press. Real skill against choreographed opponents. Against people who know what's coming, against cooperative partners whose job is to make you look effective. That's different from real combat, real unpredictable violence. I don't claim my cowboy gunfights are actual combat. They're entertainment. That's honesty. That's authenticity. Not pretending movie work proves anything about real ability. Do you understand the distinction between performing for a camera and actually being dangerous? The tension in the room was now undeniable. Johnny tried to redirect. Both guests moved past him. They were locked into something that the green room had been building toward since they arrived. I understand completely, Bruce said. Something had entered his voice. An edge, quiet but unmistakable. I understand you do westerns, you shoot guns, you ride horses, you play cowboys. That is valuable entertainment. But do not confuse your experience in front of a camera with understanding real combat. You play tough. I am tough. You simulate violence. I have studied violence my entire life, not movie violence. Real violence. Real techniques that function when someone is genuinely trying to hurt you. That is the difference between movie toughness and real toughness. Between performing a cowboy and being a martial artist. Between Clint Eastwood and Bruce Lee. The audience reacted audibly. Bruce had just issued, live on national television, a direct and unambiguous public statement that Clint performed toughness while Bruce embodied it. That one was theater and the other was real. 70 million people had just heard it. Clint's face changed. The performer's ease disappeared. His eyes settled into something cold, something that had been managing itself all evening and was no longer managing. He was not accustomed to this. His entire public identity was built on the perception of genuine danger, genuine toughness, genuine American masculinity. Someone had just said, plainly and publicly, that it was a well-executed performance. That it was exactly the thing Clint had implied martial arts was. The accusation directed back with precision. Before Clint could respond, Ray moved. He walked directly onto the set. Through the backstage area, through the stage entrance, onto the live broadcast floor of The Tonight Show with the purpose of someone who has decided that the moment has arrived and is done waiting for permission. Stage security personnel attempted to intercept him. He moved through them, too large, too committed, the physical facts of his size making the intervention impossible without creating something larger and worse. They stepped back. Ray reached Bruce's chair. He grabbed the collar with both hands. Lifted Bruce slightly from the seat, using the size differential as a physical argument, using the mass as a statement about hierarchy that was clearer than anything he could have said with words. His voice carried to the microphones. You don't talk to Mr. Eastwood like that. You don't disrespect him. You don't challenge him. You're nobody. You're a foreign actor who got lucky. You don't compare yourself to him. You're not his equal. You're nothing. You're less than nothing. And I'm here to make sure you understand that. Make sure you remember your place. The studio went completely silent. 70 million people watching. Every person in the building frozen. A security guard had just grabbed a guest by the collar on live television and issued a direct physical threat. On the most watched program in America. On Carson's stage, which had hosted presidents and astronauts and every major figure in American culture across decades of broadcasting, and which had never hosted anything like this. Everyone in that studio was waiting to see what happened next. Bruce did not panic. He did not struggle, did not show fear, did not produce any of the reactions that Ray had presumably expected from someone he had grabbed by the collar and lifted from a chair and told was nothing. What settled across his face in the moment between the grab and the response was something different from any of those things. The stillness that serious martial artists develop, not the stillness of paralysis but the stillness of complete readiness, the specific quiet that precedes action, the state of someone whose nervous system has processed the situation and is already in the process of deciding what the situation requires. His hands moved. Not wildly, not desperately, not with the scrambling urgency of someone trying to escape from a grip that outweighed them by 150 pounds. With the precision and economy of someone for whom this specific type of encounter had been trained for until the appropriate response was as automatic as breathing. Wing Chun trapping. Both of Ray's wrists found simultaneously the specific grip positions that redirected the force of the hold without requiring matching strength to overcome it, controlling the structural mechanics of the grab rather than fighting the mass behind it. A single continuous motion, all of it connected, each element setting up the next without pause, without recovery, without the visible sequencing that untrained observers could follow. 3 seconds from grab to reversal. Ray's hands were no longer on Bruce Lee. They were being controlled by Bruce Lee, the smaller man he had grabbed to demonstrate hierarchy and send a message about worth, now holding both of Ray's wrists in the specific positions that made Ray's mass and his size and his linebacker's body irrelevant to the outcome, because the outcome was being determined by angles and leverage and the 30 years of daily work that those 3 seconds had expressed. The audience did not quite follow what had happened. The cameras did not quite capture the sequence. Everything had occurred too fast for real-time processing. People simply registered that Ray had grabbed Bruce, and then something had happened, and now Ray's hands were not where Ray had put them and Bruce Lee was standing, having come out of the chair at some point during the sequence, and the geometry of who was controlling whom had reversed. Ray's expression showed the specific confusion of someone whose physical certainty has encountered a result it was not built to process. Bruce drew him forward, using Ray's own startled forward lean against him, adding the small directional pressure that converted Ray's attempt to reassert the grab into an extended stumble. Then Bruce's palm strike found the solar plexus. Not full power. Controlled force, precisely calibrated, the force of a teacher making a point rather than a fighter trying to win, the minimum required to produce the maximum educational effect, delivered with the anatomical precision of someone who had spent 30 years learning exactly where to place exactly how much force to produce exactly what result. Ray's eyes went wide. His mouth opened. The breath detonated out of him in the complete sudden way that solar plexus strikes produce, not a gradual exhalation but a total involuntary expulsion, the diaphragm locking in spasm, the breathing mechanism interrupting itself completely. His body locked. He was standing, but only standing. Unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to do anything except stand on the stage floor of The Tonight Show with 70 million people watching him, controlled and neutralized by the man he had grabbed to demonstrate that the man could be controlled and neutralized. 5 seconds total. From the moment Ray's hands closed on Bruce's collar to the moment Ray stood frozen and unable to breathe on live television. 5 seconds that contained within them the complete answer to the question that Clint had been raising all evening about whether Bruce Lee was real. Not a theoretical answer, not a philosophical response, not a demonstration with a cooperative partner. A live response to a genuine unprovoked physical attack, delivered under the most public conditions imaginable, without preparation, without choreography, without a single cooperative element. Real, unambiguous, unedited. On live television. In front of everyone. Security rushed in, took hold of Ray, and removed him from the broadcast. Ray went, still processing what had happened to him, still unable to fully breathe, still somewhere in the gap between the certainty he had arrived with and the result he was leaving with. The studio audience did not react immediately. There was a pause, the pause of 300 people whose brains were processing something that did not fit cleanly into any existing category and required more time than usual before generating a response. Then the applause came. Building from sections, spreading, becoming sustained, becoming a standing ovation, not in celebration of a man being hurt, not in the spirit of a competition's conclusion, but in recognition of something they had just witnessed that transcended the specific event. They had just watched martial arts demonstrate itself under conditions that admitted no alternative explanation. No camera angles. No cooperative partners. No choreographic arrangement. A physical threat had arrived without warning and been neutralized in 5 seconds with precision and control that left the aggressor standing but unable to continue while the person he had attacked sat back down and straightened his collar. Everything that had been doubted was no longer deniable. Everything that Clint had implied was theatrical was visibly, undeniably, irrevocably not theatrical. 70 million people had been watching, and the evidence was in the footage, available for replay without editing. Bruce sat back down, adjusted his collar, straightened his jacket, let his breathing return to its normal pattern. "I apologize," he said, addressing Johnny, the audience, the room. "That was not planned, not intended, not what I came here for. I came to talk about martial arts, about philosophy, about sharing something I believe in deeply. Not to fight, not to prove anything through violence. But when attacked, I defend. When threatened, I respond. When grabbed, I protect myself. That is what martial arts teaches. Not aggression, defense. Not hurting, surviving. That is what everyone just witnessed. The principle behind the response. I hope that is what people take from this." Johnny, who had spent 30 years behind his desk navigating every kind of unexpected moment that live television produced, sat in the specific frozen state of someone whose experience had not prepared him for this particular version of unexpected. Clint sat still. He had watched his bodyguard walk onto a live television broadcast and assault a guest. He had watched Bruce neutralize that assault in 5 seconds. He had watched the man he had spent the first half of the evening implying was theatrical prove, on live television, in the most direct way available, that theatrical was precisely the wrong word. His expression was not the cold competitive expression it had been before. Something had dissolved in it. The hierarchy machinery, the need to establish himself as the real star, the senior presence, the authentic American icon, all of it had just been made irrelevant by what he had watched happen in 5 seconds on a stage where he was sitting 4 feet away. He extended his hand. Bruce looked at it. Then at Clint's face. What was in the face was different from everything that had been in it before. Not performance, not management, not the careful calibration of an image that had been decades in construction. Something more direct and more honest than any of that. "I apologize," Clint said. "For what I said. For my bodyguard. For all of it. You were right. I play tough. You are tough. I simulate. You demonstrate. I was wrong. I was disrespectful when I had no cause to be. I was competitive when I should have been collegial. I'm sorry. I mean that genuinely. Will you accept it?" Bruce looked at the hand for another moment. Then took it. "Of course," he said. "This is behind us. We move forward as colleagues, as professionals who respect what each other has built. That is what I wanted from the beginning. Just respect. Just acknowledgement. Just being seen as legitimate and real and worthy. You've given me that now through the apology and through the changed perspective. I appreciate it genuinely." The rest of the interview was different in every way from what had preceded it. The competitive edge was gone from both sides, replaced by the specific warmth that sometimes emerges between people who have been honest with each other under pressure. Clint asked Bruce about Jeet Kune Do, about the principles behind the techniques, about what 30 years of serious training actually produced in a practitioner. Bruce asked Clint about westerns, about what the genre represented in American culture, about what made the relationship between audiences and those films so enduring and so powerful. Both learning from each other. Both sharing. Both demonstrating that the confrontation that had preceded this conversation had been the specific kind of conflict that, when resolved honestly, produces more genuine connection than any polite interview could have generated. Ray was dismissed that night. Clint did not deliberate over the decision. A man who would walk onto a live television broadcast and physically assault a guest in the service of protecting his employer's ego had no place in his life. Loyalty without judgment was not loyalty. It was a liability, a source of damage, something that made the person it was supposedly protecting smaller rather than larger. Ray was gone before the night was over. The footage from that broadcast traveled through the culture with the specific velocity of something that carries genuinely new information. It was shown on news programs, analyzed in martial arts publications, discussed in gyms and training halls and living rooms across the country. The discussions all converged on the same central point, regardless of whether they approached it from martial arts, from television, from the specific question of what had just happened between Bruce Lee and Clint Eastwood. The techniques were real. The speed was real. The skill was real. Not because Bruce had said so. Not because practitioners had demonstrated it in controlled conditions with cooperative partners. Because 70 million people had watched it applied in the most uncontrolled conditions available, a live television stage, a genuine physical assault with no warning, no preparation, no second take. 5 seconds that produced a result that could not be attributed to camera angles or cooperative performance because the cameras had been rolling on a live broadcast and the person who initiated the physical contact had been doing so with genuine hostile intent. Bruce Lee died in July 1973. The Tonight Show incident was weeks before his death, one of the last major public appearances of his life, and it became part of the documentary record of what he was, not the version constructed for film, not the version presented in demonstrations, but the version that showed up unscripted on a television stage when a man grabbed his collar and delivered a message about worth. Years after that night, people who had been there were asked what they remembered most. The 5 seconds came up consistently. But so did what came after. The conversation between two men who had started the evening in competition and ended it in genuine acknowledgement of what each other had built and meant. The violence of Ray's attack and the precision of Bruce's response had settled the factual question about whether martial arts worked under real conditions. But what Bruce had said after settling it, the specific humility of "I came here to share something I believe in, not to prove anything through violence," was the thing that stayed with people longest. The evidence of someone whose confidence in what they had built was so complete that they had no need to celebrate when the building proved itself under conditions it had not sought. Clint Eastwood told the story for years afterward. He said he had come to the Tonight Show that night as the main attraction and had left as the person who had learned the most significant thing. He said the 5 seconds had been the most direct education he had received in 30 years of making films about violence, the specific and irreducible demonstration of the difference between portraying something and embodying it. He said he had been wrong about Bruce Lee in the green room and in the first half of the interview, and that being wrong in public on a stage in front of 70 million people was the appropriate consequence of having been wrong in the specific way he had been wrong. He said Ray's dismissal had been the easiest decision of his professional life, and that the handshake he had extended to Bruce at the end of the broadcast was the most genuinely meant gesture he had made in a career that had required thousands of gestures. 5 seconds on The Tonight Show. October 1973. 70 million witnesses. One genuine physical attack. One controlled and precise response. And the conversation that followed, which proved that what martial arts taught went beyond defense. It included the specific discipline of doing only what the situation required and nothing that it didn't, of stopping when the threat was stopped, of sitting back down and straightening your collar and being ready to talk about philosophy. That was Bruce Lee. That was what the films had been showing, what the demonstrations had been expressing, what the philosophy had been articulating for 20 years before one Bodyguard's decision to walk onto a live broadcast made it undeniable. Real. Completely and permanently and publicly and finally real.